And then you just lay there in that sorry state of a human for 2 or 3 hours, just in a ball, shivering, shaking, coughing, struggling to breathe. And you're just in this black hole inside yourself, fighting it.
Good afternoon, you're watching ABTV, and today we have two very special guests joining us. Suman Manning and Shane Manning are COVID survivors, and today they will be sharing their experiences with us here on ABTV. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Oh, not at all.
Great. First things first, Suman and Shane, how are you both feeling and how are you both doing right now?
Yeah, I'm feeling amazing, you know.
Absolutely fine. Yeah. And I have felt like this the whole time, actually, which is, you know, what makes me asymptomatic. But yeah, no complaints.
All right, that's great to hear. But Suman, you've had a bit of a strange experience, right? Were you diagnosed twice?
You could call it that, but I guess it was the same thing the whole time. I tested positive with Shane, but when I went in for my retest, which is actually quite shy of the 2-week quarantine, I tested negative, and you need 2 consecutive negatives to be cleared. And I went in for my 3rd test, and it showed that I was still positive.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that I became positive again. I think I was still positive. And so then I had to go into quarantine again for another 9 days, and then got my 2 consecutive negatives.
Right. Were the symptoms the same when both of you all got it at the same time?
No, we couldn't have been more
polar opposite. You know,
opposites of it.
I was absolutely floored, like totally bedridden, massive amounts of fever, everything. And Sue was 100%. And it was only because in the clinic when I got tested that they forced Sue to get tested, because she'd been with me and they seen my symptoms were so severe that they tested Sue.
So do you know why that is? I mean, why did it affect you differently?
No idea.
Well, I think to an extent, everybody's different, and you know, your immunity levels are different, your bodies are different. But what we learned from being in the hospital is that they're seeing a lot of people like me. So in the beginning, when I thought I was the anomaly and that I was, you know, almost unique, it seemed, because all you see on the television and the media is how COVID affects you and you're really sick. Yeah. You don't see the asymptomatic people at all. So when I thought in the beginning that I was actually quite unique in the sense that I had no symptoms, but apparently it seems like there's a almost 50% chance that most people are asymptomatic.
Can you tell us or take us through your experience? We're just trying to let our viewers know that, you know, a lot of people have said that the symptoms are very similar to that of a flu, so it's no big deal, but it's obviously not. And we just want to know it from your experience, from the horse's mouth, if I may put it that way.
See, personally, it goes in, I'd liken it to sort of 3 stages or 3 phases, where the first day or 2, when I started just feeling a little bit under the weather, it wasn't much more than just feeling a bit average. It was a case of, look, you know, go home, get some rest, should be good in the morning. Then I went into sort of this phase 2, and I'd actually seen, there was an English guy that lived in China. He also explained it very similarly, where you do get the flu-like symptoms, a lot of body ache, a lot of fever, headache. And it was in this point I started to lose a bit of appetite and things like that. But nothing had progressed into my chest at this stage. And it was just purely, look, it was a lot of uncomfortable feelings and stuff like that. But other than that, it was okay. And then before I went into the phase 3, which is when you really know you've got coronavirus. I had a period of about 24 hours where I didn't feel so bad. I'd finally managed to get out of bed, things like that. I'd had a little bit of appetite. And this is when we went camping, because I'd been tested once, but at this point I didn't know I'd had contact and I hadn't traveled to any of the listed countries. So the doctor, as per their guidelines, didn't test me for coronavirus, only tested me for influenza A and B and whatever else. And their reports come back from blood samples, swabs, stool samples. You've got nothing viral that they picked up on.
When did you go to the doctor for the test?
This was
17th of March.
Yeah, so the 15th is when I started feeling average, which was the Sunday afternoon. It was the Tuesday afternoon. About 3 hours later, I got the results. So I was told, look, you're clear, whatever it is, it's just knocking you down. You should be okay. Take Panadol, stay hydrated and get rest. So we went camping on the Thursday into the Friday. I felt okay. I was still feeling not 100%. And then Friday night I got home, and that's when I'd sort of gone into this phase 3, as I've sort of categorized it, and really started going downhill, started getting the cough, the body ache increased, the headache, the diarrhea, and it went into my chest. So
yeah, it sounded terrible that
it did.
Saturday. It was actually a really different kind of cough as well. It's not congested. It's very dry, but it was very
painful.
He sounded like he'd smoked a packet of cigars. It was very, very severe.
No, I don't smoke. So then, 24 hours later, I was totally wiped out, just absolutely floored. And Sue came in and said, look, we're going back to the clinic. So by this point, we'd phoned them and said, look, we've had contact with somebody who's positive. So they said, look, wear masks. So in we went with masks on and what have you, and they were ready for us. So we went straight upstairs to an isolation room. The tests were carried out, and this is when I was basically laying in bed, curled up in a ball in the fetal position, just a mess. Yeah. They tested me, they tested Sue because she was with me and they'd seen that. 24 hours after this, we got the call from the government and said, look, you've tested positive, we'll try and find you a hotel bed.
Hospital bed.
Hotel bed, a hospital bed. And by this point, I was totally consumed by it.
Yeah, he was not good.
About 36 hours after that, they finally found me a hospital bed in the Park Clinic. Parkview, the Mediclinic. Okay. So in we went, and they'd done a load of tests, and over the next 4 days, I was getting progressively worse. I wasn't responding to the medicines, to the treatment. They were taking blood every day. They were giving me the antivirals that they had access to, antibiotics. And this is when I'd progressed into pneumonia as well. So I'm guessing that you've seen the social media post I'd done on Facebook. Yeah. And this is when I'd really sort of nosedived down into I've sort of said as a deep black hole. It was a big dark pit that this thing dragged you into. And it really held you down. And it a lot more than a flu. It really wasn't pleasant. And with the struggling to breathe, you have to try and sleep sitting up. I was on the nebulizer, not 24 hours a day, but I was on the nebulizer quite often. Vitamin D injection in the hip every day. Seriously, zero appetite. And, for a heavy set guy, I should be just even sitting, burning a few thousand calories. And I was lucky to be consuming probably 250 calories a day. And it totally annihilated me for the 4 or 5 days in the hospital. I was running a fever of 39 and a half, nearly 40. As and when I did eat, that had a pretty quick reaction to toilet movements as well, which was very unpleasant. And I really stank as well. And I guess that was what was coming off my lungs. And during that time, they did a CT scan of my lungs because they were x-raying me every day. Doing ECGs, but they also did a CT scan. And by this stage, they said, look, you've got full-blown pneumonia and the coronavirus had consumed your lungs 100%. So with that, my O2 saturation levels were decreasing at an alarming rate. So I wasn't getting the blood as I should be to the organs and the extremities.
Another thing that makes this entire virus really scary is the fact that there is no treatment or vaccination. So what exactly were you being given when you were in the clinic?
There was the antiviral, which is the
hydroxychloroquine
or whatever it's called, which is the one that's, being trialed, being labeled as the one that has the best effect, I guess. I was on an antibiotic.
Azithromycin, one of the antibiotics.
She's got a better memory than me. Azithromycin for my lungs. I was getting an injection every day of vitamin D. I was on 1,000 milligram IV. Don't know about zinc. 1,000 milligram IV of paracetamol every 8 hours. plus a really large bag of fluids with vitamin C in it.
Shane's experience tells us how real it is, because the first time I was sent your video, it was captioned, "Oh my God, this is real," because people really weren't accepting the fact that, you know, it's happening in Dubai and it can be this bad. There were a lot of people who were still ignorant of the effects of it. And Suman's experience, your experience, basically just says that, you know, you can have it and not know, which is why social distancing is, of course, important. But were both of y'all in the same hospital?
We actually swapped places at some point, at a point last week, where he came home. And because he was coming home, it was my 11th day of being in quarantine. I decided to do my retest because, you know, he was coming back to the house. The house was professionally disinfected while he'd been away, and I was in isolation. But for us to kind of resume to be in quarantine normally, we wanted to be sure that I was okay. So I did my retest. We were apart even for that first night. And then I got my result the very next day saying, I'd got my first negative. And I was like, this is great. So I went back the very next day to do my follow-up test, and had to wait for 3 days after that to then get a result saying it's positive.
And off you go, straight to the hospital I was in, same floor, different view.
Yeah.
And then
he had the VIP room. I had a normal, very nice room facing the other side. So you couldn't make this up. You really.
But again, this wasn't reinfection, yeah? It's not like you got the virus again. It's just that the test was wrong.
We don't know that.
So no, actually what the doctor said is basically we're all potentially carrying it. The levels of the virus. So when you read your report, it says that the virus is detected or undetected. So the levels of the virus could vary. When they swab you, you could have swabbed in a place where there was not in like a high concentration of it.
Yeah.
So that's why they insist on 2 or 3 consecutive negatives. They want to be 100% sure of it, that your levels are low or non-existent.
But again, just talking about the hospital that both of y'all were in, Parkview, was it?
Mediclinic Parkview, yeah.
Right. So what were the facilities there? How were the medical staff? What was the equipment that was being used? Can you tell us more about that?
In terms of the hospital, the staff, they all have all the equipment and the precautionary, you know, gear, I suppose. They're
double masked,
triple masked, gloved.
The blue disposable protective gear, the visor as well.
I was then moved to a hotel, which worked really, really well. Again, you're in complete isolation, but you have a lot of comfort. You make sure that they had a little reading material for you with exercises that they recommend that you do, stretching, as well as some apps that you could download. It was, I think that they thought of a lot of things.
Sorry, which hotel was this? Where were you quarantined?
I was quarantined on the Palm.
Okay.
I think there's a few hotels there that are being used. They had taken amazing care about the property as well. So everything in the lobby was covered in plastic. The lifts were all made sure that staff and patients were not mixing together. So they kept the staff very, very safe. The hotel rooms in itself, all the decor is stripped away, I think, and put in storage. So any kind of contamination is all, surface area, everything was really well thought of.
I'm curious now. So you've got 3 children, correct? And also, Shane, your symptoms started much before you were actually admitted to the hospital. So how is it that your kids weren't affected by it, or they weren't infected?
I know. So yeah, we've got 3 almost 10-year-old triplets, all very active, all very healthy. Got tested. Sue's sister lives with us here. Again, was tested. Nothing. So it's
our helper and her husband live with us as well. It's a lot of people actually. They've all been tested, and by God's grace, they're all tested negative. So the kids were with Shane in our bed the morning that we went to be tested.
Yeah, so how they became negative or how they stayed negative, we don't know.
So what next now? I know both of you all have been tested negative thrice now, is it? Yeah. So right now, are there any after effects of the virus? More for you, Shane, because you've had a different experience.
I've sort of started back training and stuff like that, and I did a little mini triathlon in the back garden the other day. But I have to be very wary that my lungs still are healing. So it's a case of, any sort of exercise and activity is limited to a very low, just maintaining low heart rate. I think more importantly, what next for us, and it's something very, very close to home, is we believe that they're doing a lot of clinical trials for plasma donation now that we've got the antibodies, and that's something we'd like to do. I've spoken to DHA about it, and they're trying to find more information for us. I've spoken to Dr. Samara, who is our treating physician at MediClinic.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing your experience with us, Shane and Suman. It was great to hear from you. And I'm sure this is again going to, of course, your experiences are going to motivate more people to stay at home and follow all of the measures that the government is asking us to take and urging us to take. And yeah, stay healthy.
Yep. You too.
Stay safe, stay
healthy.
Stay
safe.
And stay home, of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.